Hello and welcome. You're about to watch Bereavement and Other Losses as part of the Wellbeing Education Resilience programme. We'd like to draw your attention to the Face COVID video by Russ Harris. If you haven't already seen it, please do take 5 minutes to do so at some point. It gives a great overview of how to support wellbeing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You can click on the link below of the accompanying PowerPoint presentation when it's in slideshow mode.
This is the fourth video in the Watch element of the WER programme. It focuses on bereavement and other losses. There may be key concepts that are touched upon very briefly in this video that are explained more detail in the concept index video. These are marked with a blue star with CI in the middle. Should you want any further information or have any questions on anything covered in this webinar, you can book onto one of our Q&A conferences.
The Bereavement and Other Losses section of the WER programme is split into 4 parts. This slide shows you which part you're about to watch and also lists the other parts in case there are any other aspects you would like to find out more about.
This webinar will cover the following topics: a helpful book for schools to support a child or young person whose parent has died, resources for finding suitable storybook materials, and thinking about using stories with children and young people. If you see this symbol of a thought bubble of activity in the middle, please pause the video if you wish to take time to do the suggested activity or reflection. Whilst watching this video, please be kind to yourself. Take stock and notice how you're feeling throughout. Should you feel the need to pause or take a break, please do so. You may also wish to reach out to a friend or a family member. Should you wish to seek further advice and support, there is information on how you can do so in the final slides of the webinar. Alternatively, you can speak to your mental health lead at your school and they can put you in touch with the allocated practitioner from the School Wellbeing Service.
If you have a child or young person in your school whose parent dies, then this book can be a great resource for you to use. It's called Independent Thinking on Loss and it's by Ian Gilbert. And it was previously titled The Little Book of Bereavement for Schools, which was originally published in 2008. And Ian Gilbert, who is one of the founders of Independent Thinking Company, he unfortunately had his wife die, and his 3 children were all at different stages in their school life and different types of school. And they were all having some positive experience and some difficulties returning back to school after their mum died and thinking about how school staff could help them and what they needed from the school staff. And Ian sat down with his 3 children and together they wrote a PowerPoint that they shared with their teachers at schools and had really good feedback about that in terms of how staff really felt empowered about how to help them more, having seen the experiences that they were going through their own eyes, through the eyes of the children and young people. So Ian then developed this into a book, and 10 years plus, he's rewritten the book now where the children have also added in their own reflective chapters, looking back on when they were younger, when they were children at school, and pulling out experiences of when things went really well for them and things that staff did that were great and really helpful and supportive, and also identifying and highlighting some of the times where things happen in school that were actually really painful for them and what schools and staff can learn from that. So the next couple of slides just talk you through some of the content of the book and the key messages that Ian and his children thought were really valuable for staff to know. So once you know that somebody has died, if you have permission from the family to share that information, then do try and tell people, staff members, classmates, as soon as you can, and to try and stamp out gossip. Sending a condolence message to the family could be either through a phone call or if it's difficult to contact somebody because quite obviously they may be overwhelmed or busy talking with lots of different people, then a card or some flowers or some kind of message just to show that the staff recognise what's happened and that they're thinking about them. When the children return to school, check in with them to see, acknowledge that you know what's happened, ask them how they'd like to be spoken to and how they'd like to be spoken about. And that's really helpful to try and get them on board and allowing them to give you that feedback right from the start. It can be tricky for staff. Sometimes they don't want to acknowledge something that's happened with the child because they feel like they might get upset or they might upset the child. And as we talk about in some of the other parts of the bereavement and loss presentations, sometimes things are upsetting when they're spoken about, and that is sad, but it's okay. And it's better than not talking about it at all, not mentioning it, because then the child might be thinking, well, do they know that my mum's just died? Do they know my dad's just died? What's expected of me? When might they talk about it? So actually just talking about it and acknowledging it, hopefully with somebody that knows the child well, just to, give your condolences and just to acknowledge that you know what's happened is really important. Teach other children to know what to say and how to handle things. And I think this can be done maybe in preparation for the child returning, or once the child has returned, you can ask if they would like to be in the class when this is spoken about, or whether they'd rather not be in the class when this is spoken about. So again, get some feedback from them about what they would like and what they would prefer. It's fine to recognise in children that they might be wary or scared. Some children have preferences for liking to have lots of attention on this and being asked lots of questions, and other children, young people, don't want their friends to mention it or talk to them about it while they're at school. So again, gauging from the child or young person what hopes and wishes they've got about how the children will speak to them can feed into these kind of chats and prep talks with the class. There can be a real distinction sometimes between what goes on at home and what goes on at school. And then there may be all sorts of things going on at home in terms of the grieving process and family get-togethers and different things going on. So thinking about how sometimes children like to do their grieving in a certain place, so they may come to school and wish school to be work focused, and then when they're at home they can be emotional, or it could actually be that sometimes that's blurred and sometimes school is school but actually they're a bit overwhelmed. It may be that they struggle to do work at home, so sometimes that needs to be acknowledged and a plan made around. Grieving is really tiring and it's draining and it's exhausting, and you may see some behaviour changes in the child or young person in their attention span, in their demeanour. They may be, physically more tired. They may look a bit more drained. So just ensuring that you promote their well-being in terms of trying to find out things that are helping them and soothing them, trying to prompt them to eat and drink regularly, to take exercise, to do things that they find fun, allow them time and encourage them to have times where they can giggle and laugh and be happy, and take a break from some of their sadness and their grieving, to allow their body to try and recover for the next bout that they may have that will be upsetting for them. So they need to kind of try and work around this idea of not getting too worn out and too overwhelmed. Being considerate of homework and evening commitments. So it may be that there is a struggle to do working from home. And so it may be that you agree some kind of work plan, maybe some homework clubs or something after school, or just be thinking about minimising work at home for a time. But you also need to still have some clear expectations of what you want children and people to be doing. And sometimes doing tasks at home can give them something to focus on, and they might actually enjoy doing some tasks at home. So just, again, checking with them and with their family and see how they're managing. When the mum or the dad comes into school, do acknowledge the loss with them. Try not to avoid them. Sometimes it can be quite tempting to do so if you're not sure what to say, or you don't know what to say, you're trying to think of the right thing to say. It's much better just to say hi, and even to acknowledge that you're not sure what to say, than just not saying anything at all.
So this is just continued. We have point 9, keep talking to the child and let them know you still remember. This is important. So grief isn't, as we've spoken about earlier on in the slides as well, it's not a simple linear journey. It's something they'll be experiencing forever. So it's not a matter of, I'm going to work with this child for 12 weeks and they'll be okay. It's always check in on them a year down the line, 15 months down the line, 2 years down the line. Their parent maybe died in year 7, year 11, I'm still checking in on them. It's really important to keep that child in mind throughout the whole of their school journey. Remember different anniversaries. So I know in the book, one of the daughters was asked to make them a Mother's Day card. Their mothers died. So it's so important to remember these things on these anniversaries, on days like Mother's Days, maybe on the child's birthday. If there's an anniversary of the death, it's really important to keep these things in mind. Curriculum hotspots, for example, the Mother's Day, Father's Day, like I said, PSHE, birthdays, charity fundraisers, etc. So these are all things that can trigger that grief. They're all things that going to make them think about it. It's important to prepare them beforehand. When another parent dies, consider other children with whom this will resonate with. So just because you're focusing on one child who's had a parent death, obviously it's important to care for that child, but there may be other children whose parents have died previously and have sort of come out the other end of the grief process, but the death of this child's parent may trigger those feelings in them again. So if you do have one death, it's important to check on the other children who have been bereft also. So learn about helping children to cope with bereavement from agencies. So make sure you've got knowledge of all of the agencies around you, all the services around you. If there's certain things that they're doing to support children with bereavement and loss, feel free to take on what they're giving. So the advice they're giving, the support they give, because it's really important to reinforce the same message. Time doesn't heal. It is just what you go through to come to terms with things better. So again, this is what we've covered throughout as well, in the fact that it's a forever process, and you don't heal or deal with it. You just learn to live with it. So thank you. You can make a terrible situation a bit less stressful for a grieving family. So that's obviously the final chapter. And I really hope you do take the time to gain access to this book, because it's a really good insight into what a whole family are really experiencing and what school is really like for them. And it could be totally invaluable in terms of aiding your practice in supporting them.
Books and stories are a great way of exploring and discussing themes around loss and death, grief and bereavement. Winston's Wish publish a really great list of books that helpfully describe the themes of each one, so that you can choose and select relevant ones to you, and they also organise them into age groups too. When you're sharing a story with somebody, you don't need to make explicit links to someone's life unless they raise it themselves. If they see something in the character in the storyline they relate to or resonates with them and they want to talk about that, then that's fine, but we don't need to make that link for them. Some children and young people like to reread the same books over and over again. And as we know that some books can be very powerful and can connect to evoke quite strong feelings. So remember that it's okay to feel and to show yourself feeling emotion. And if you feel yourself getting quite overwhelmed, then just let someone know that you need a bit of support. And sometimes when you're reading some of these books, it's a good idea to have a look through them yourself first, just to see how it sits with you as a person and your own experiences before sharing it with a child or young person. You may also be interested in finding resources for adults who are supporting children and young people with grieving processes of loss and bereavement. These resources could be helpful for parents and carers or for school or college staff. Child Bereavement UK have a great resource list. There's a link here. If you're watching the video, you won't be able to click on the link directly. If you go to the accompanying PowerPoint presentation, you can be able to click on the link when it's in slideshow mode. The bereavement and other losses presentations as part of the WER is split into 4 parts. This slide shows you which part you've just watched and lists the other parts in case there are other areas which you would like to explore further. The Thurrock COVID-19 Child Wellbeing Support Line has been set up to support children, young people, their families and school staff during the coronavirus pandemic. It is for anybody to call or email if they'd like to speak to somebody about an issue or a theme to do with wellbeing. This can be staff from school, parents and family members, young people themselves. If they call the support line number or email the helpline email, leave a message with their name and contact number, and someone from the team will call them back. There are also some other contacts here for local support services. Now we're at the end of this session, it's a good time just to check in with yourself and to see how you're feeling now. As we said in the beginning, the content of the WER programme can impact on how we're thinking and feeling and how it relates to us in our everyday lives. If you've been affected by anything you have read or heard about today, please seek support, either from your own support network, and there's some ideas listed on the slide here, or from additional support networks, whether that's local services or national sources of support. Following on from watching one or more of the videos or presentations in the WER programme, you may have questions about the content or themes from your school around wellbeing more generally. So for the Ask and Share aspect of the WER programme, we've scheduled a series of webinar conferences. These are online events, question and answer sessions that school staff or other professionals can come along to virtually and join us in a panel of people working in Thurrock. At these, questions that have been submitted can be responded to and discussed, or good practice can be shared among the schools. It may be that you want to work collaboratively as a whole staff to decide on what questions will be submitted. And more dates will be added to these conferences throughout the spring and summer term. For more information about the dates and how to book, you can check online to where the presentations are listed, or ask your school's mental health lead for more information.